The 2023 federal budget put it this way: everyone should have a safe and affordable place to call home. Ahmed Hussain is Canada's Minister of Housing and Diversity and Inclusion and the Liberal MP for York South Weston. And he joins us now on what the federal government is doing to make that idea a reality. It's good to have you in that chair.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, first time on this program, I think.
Yes, first time.
Excellent. Good to have you here. This issue has been described as a housing crisis, and I just want to start there. Do you see it as a housing crisis?
It definitely is a very challenging issue for very many Canadians.
I'm going to stop you right there.
Yeah.
Very challenging doesn't mean crisis. Is it a crisis?
I've used the word crisis before, and I'm happy to use it again. The fact of the matter is, it is an issue that we all have to deal with through different levels of government. But we are making tremendous progress in this regard, and but we need to do more because the challenges are real. People need to have access to safe and affordable housing, but also housing that meets their particular needs. Different Canadians have different housing needs depending on where they are in the housing spectrum, and we have to be there for all of them.
So if it is a crisis, or even if it is just a very challenging situation, do you think your government has responded with the adequate boldness required to meet the moment?
Absolutely, and I'll say that because, first of all, to even respond, you have to prioritize the issue. And prior to our government, the previous government did not prioritize this issue. They didn't see that they had a role in federal leadership and responsibility on this issue. They simply invested very little amounts.
The issue may not have been as much of a crisis under the previous government as it is now.
Lack of access to affordable housing has always been an issue in the last number of decades. And so what we said is we will bring federal leadership back into housing, but also federal resources. And that's why in 2017, we came up with the National Housing Strategy. And that wasn't designed in Ottawa. We spent the time from 2015 to 2017 to actually talk to Canadians on what this would look like. And through that input, we were able to put together the National Housing Strategy. A 10-year plan, started off as a plan of $40 billion. Now it's grown to $82 billion. That's the level of ambition that we have in this space. We know there's more to do. And we can't do it alone, by the way. We need every level of government to step up as well.
Do you have good relationships with the other levels to make this happen?
We do. We partner on all sorts of things, from building more affordable housing, repairing existing stock, providing direct rental supports to people through the Canada Housing Benefit, which is a 50-50 shared program between us and the provinces and territories.
You getting on okay with Doug Ford?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I work very closely with my provincial counterpart in Ontario, Steve Clark, who I have constant contact with respect to these issues.
And the Premier's nephew actually shares the same riding you do.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So we work well together.
He's in cabinet too.
But going back to the federal government, we've not only brought back federal leadership, but we've brought significant resources to the table through this program called the National Housing Strategy. Within it, there's a number of programs and streams of funding for different types of housing, again, to respond to the needs of Canadians who are at different stages in the housing spectrum. You can't have one program that fits everyone, right? And so I would argue that the National Housing Strategy shows the level of ambition that we are bringing to the table. And in fact, if you listen to the other side, the Conservatives have been attacking us for doing too much. They want us to do less. And they've said that the federal government should kind of just leave this to the provinces and territories.
Okay,
and we don't agree with that.
They're not here right now, so I'm not going to worry about what they have to say. Let's worry about what you've had to say. Here's a line in the budget. This is from the just released budget by Chrystia Freeland. The government is committed to ensuring that investor activity, especially among those who own a significant number of investment properties, is helping, not hurting, housing affordability in Canada, and will review whether the government needs to rebalance the housing market in favor of Canadians looking for a home to live in. What would signal to you that it's time for the government to take measures to rebalance the market?
So, first of all, enabling people to access enabling first-time home buyers to access the dream of Canadian of home ownership while also making housing affordable and sustainable for people who own their home. Those are not mutually exclusive. And so what we are doing is making sure that first we recognize that homes are not commodities. Houses are meant to be lived in by Canadians, and that's why we've taken a number of steps. The study that our finance minister is alluding to is on looking at housing as an investment tool, looking at real estate investment trusts, looking at the tax treatment of those things to see whether there's something that we could do there, as well as the measures that we've already put in place, like putting a 1% vacant tax on non-Canadian, non-residential owned real estate that is not being used. Homes should be used by Canadians to be lived in. In addition to that, as you know, we've brought in the temporary ban on foreign ownership by businesses and by individuals on Canadian residential real estate. Again, to enable more Canadians to have more access to homes so that they can purchase them and have that dream of that Canadian dream of home ownership.
I have heard criticism from economists that all of your plans involve helping get more money to first-time home buyers to get in at current high prices. And I wonder whether you are opposed to measures that would make prices actually come down.
One of the ways to enable more people to access homes is to increase supply. We simply don't have enough supply of homes in Canada. And at the local level, it is unfortunately really hard to build much housing. And so one of the things that we intend to do is to do something about that and to, again, show federal leadership in that space so that we can increase the number of homes in this country. We have the fastest growing population in the G7. We have, but we don't have the housing supply to meet that demand.
I understand that you have a delicate balance here, because on the one hand, you want to increase supply, which would presumably tamp down the cost of homes. But on the other hand, there are people who already live in homes who have their life savings in them, and they don't want the value of that resource to go down as well. So I get that it's a delicate balance. Have you found the right sweet spot in that balance?
Look, I mean, Steve, I'll say that the government of Canada is not, we don't determine the price of homes. We're not in the business of determining home prices. That is a function of the market based on supply and demand. What we can do is incentivize the supply of different types of housing to meet the accessibility and affordability needs of Canadians. So in other words, for example, a paramedic who lives in our city, who's increasingly priced out of the rental market, needs access to affordable rent. We're building more affordable rent through the rental construction financing initiative and the co-investment fund. So our job is to fund, but also incentivize local governments to just build more supply, to make and to build more affordable supply, more density around transit, making sure that we deliver and approve homes faster, so that it doesn't take too long to build anything in this country.
What's your view on the provincial government's plan to allow home building in the former Greenbelt?
Well, any type of housing projects that are funded by the federal government have to meet certain requirements. And chief among those requirements is that they have to be energy efficient, they have to meet federal environmental priorities, which obviously do not include building in environmentally sensitive land like the Greenbelt. So, I'll leave the provincial decisions to the provincial government, but what I will say is that our federal housing dollars will only go to projects that advance our federal environmental priorities, and the Greenbelt does not include those priorities.
Okay, I mean, this is obviously, housing's become a hugely political issue, in part because of that, in part because Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the opposition, has been very loud about housing, and he has represented a certain frustration, particularly among younger people who feel they are locked out of the current market. Do you feel your government, and you in particular, have adequately matched the intensity with which he has championed this issue?
He hasn't championed this issue. What he has presented is gimmicks and buzzwords. Every single time that our government has brought to the House of Commons legislation to actually help first-time home buyers get into the market, he has voted against those facilitative measures. So if he truly believes in helping people get access to the Canadian dream of home ownership, why would he vote against the first-time home buyer incentive? Why would he vote against the tax-free first-time home buyer savings account of up to $40,000 that helps tax-free, that will help first-time home buyers get closer to their dream of home ownership?
I think
so he's voted against every measure that we have taken to facilitate more home ownership. And then he goes out there and talks about how, he's frustrated that young people can't get access to their first home. We're actually doing something about it. And he hasn't, not only has he voted against our plans, he has offered nothing. He hasn't offered any alternative plans or ideas. He hasn't brought anything to the table. So he has no plan, yet he votes against concrete plans that we've made to help people.
I appreciate your position on this.
That are actually making a difference right now.
Okay, a couple things. Number one, we do understand in politics that the leader of the opposition tends to oppose. I mean, it's not shocking that they would vote against things. But the second thing is, I think on the merits, he would say, these programs that you have advanced can be inflationary, and they can actually add to the price of homes if you've got that much attention focused on the housing situation. Is there anything to those arguments?
They're targeted. I mean, the first-time home buyer tax-free savings account is only targeting first-time home buyers. It's not open to everyone. And our supports, quite frankly, to Canadians throughout COVID and now are targeted, which is exactly what economists have called for. They've said that, targeted supports to Canadians, for example, making sure that young kids can have access to dental care. Young kids from low-income families can have access to much-needed dental care. That's not inflationary. That is helping people have a better quality of life. And by the way, Mr. Poilievre has refused to say whether he'll keep that program if he ever becomes Prime Minister. So on those measures to help people afford more grocery and more food for their families, making sure that we support people to pay the rent with the top-up to the Canada Housing Benefit. He's voted against all those programs, and he's voted against all those targeted supports to Canadians.
Well, let me bring another voice into this. Here's some budget analysis from an economist named Derek Holt at Scotiabank, who had this to say just last week. In a broader public policy sense, Ottawa's housing strategy remains confusing. The Bank of Canada is trying to contain inflationary pressures and soften previously raging house prices. The feds have thrown open the immigration doors into a market with no supply, while another tax subsidy to housing starts up on Saturday in the form of the first-time homebuyers tax-free home savings account. Housing is going to rip after a temporary retrenchment, and there goes the Bank of Canada's efforts. What's your response to him?
Number of things. First of all, on immigration, a significant number of the announced immigration levels are people who are already here. People who are temporary foreign workers, international students, people who are working in other sectors who are becoming permanent residents. So they're using that space allocation that we've announced. That's number one. Number two, people who are coming through the skilled immigration streams, a number of them are actually people who are coming to fill unfilled jobs in the building trade sector. So they're actually coming to help us build more homes for Canadians. We need them. As you know, the construction sector is short of workers. Just one building trades union that I met recently, the head of that building trades union told me that they need 20,000 people today. He can hire, he said if we had access to 20,000 skilled workers today, we would bring them on because that's how much work they have to do and they don't have enough people. So immigration is helping us to fill those gaps. And ironically, those very people who are coming in will help us to build more homes for Canadians. That's number one. Number two, in terms of supply, because the individual you quoted mentioned supply, we are doing something on supply. Housing Accelerator Fund, which was announced 2 weeks before the budget by the Prime Minister, $4 billion that will go straight into municipalities and local governments to speed up the permitting and approval and delivery of housing of all types, including and especially affordable housing.
How many units do you think you can get done with that?
100,000 additional units. to what would have been normally been built if we didn't do this, 100,000 additional units, and the systemic changes that will come from the investments in the Housing Accelerator Fund, we hope will set Canada up to double the number of new homes built in Canada in the next 10 years.
Okay.
We sincerely believe that changes at the local level are also needed. Not just the investments that we're putting in, but the approvals process, the permitting process,
At
the
City Hall.
zoning changes, having more density around transit, inclusionary zoning, mixed housing. We can't go on the way we're going on.
Do you still
it takes
see
too long to do.
Do you still see too much
that.
NIMBYism at City Hall in that regard?
I see too much NIMBYism across Canada. I've seen it in mid-sized cities. I've seen it in major cities. The very places where we need more housing supply, we're seeing that resistance to new development. Part of it is also capacity. A lot of municipal governments lack the capacity to do more. They would love to do more, but they would need a little bit of investment to introduce things like e-permitting, so that the permitting process can be faster.
Why don't you run for mayor of Toronto and you can get all this unstuck really quickly?
Well, look, I mean, I'm.
People are suggesting your name.
I was very touched by that. It's very kind of them to think of me in that sense. But I'm very happy with what I'm doing.
So you're not running?
No, absolutely
Okay.
not.
You're the only politician in Toronto not running for mayor. Good. Let's get back on
It's
the
a very
path here.
important job.
I agree.
And I love the city of Toronto. I'm a Toronto area MP. But I'm happy doing what I'm doing.
Let me get back to immigration, because it's a file you know well. You used to be the Minister of Immigration. I just want to understand how it works behind the scenes. When the government, in its wisdom, decides that it wants, as it will soon be, 500,000 new Canadians coming into the country every year, does somebody from the Immigration Ministry actually sit down with somebody from the Housing Ministry and say, we need to coordinate this and make sure this will work? Does that happen?
Absolutely. Yeah. Two things I'll say about that. Before our government presents immigration targets, their targets every year, we consult with Canadians. We consult with businesses, we consult with settlement agencies, we consult with municipalities, provinces, territories, everyone to get their perspective. Secondly, I'll do one better for you. I actually have been working very closely with the Immigration Minister, Sean Fraser, and we've had a lot of discussions on how we can work together to synchronize housing and immigration. And one of the things that Minister Fraser is going to do is he will, in addition to the regular streams that he has, he will have two dedicated, he will introduce a number of enhancements to existing streams to zero in on attracting healthcare workers and building trades workers, people who will actually come in through our immigration system to help us build more homes for Canadians. He will do that because we have the tools. There's a wonderful program in immigration called Express Entry. So he will run additional draws so that he can target healthcare workers and building trades skilled workers, because those two are much needed in our country now, and I believe that will make a big difference in terms of building more homes as soon as possible.
A few minutes to go. Let's see if we can hit on a few more items here. You've been on the record as saying you want to make sure that your measures don't hurt so-called mom-and-pop landlords. How come?
Well, look, I mean, I think there has to be a balance between making sure that people are encouraged to make their supply available to Canadian families. When we put in the 1% vacant tax on non-residential, non-Canadian owners of vacant properties, what we're really trying to incentivize is that those properties should be inhabited by a Canadian family or individual. Properties should not be vacant. So we're encouraging people to allow their supply to become available to Canadian families. And that is what I was referring to when I made those comments. Yeah.
Don't think me a jerk for asking this question, because it's a little chippy, but about a third of federal cabinet ministers, I gather, own investment properties, and I think you do too. Do you feel somewhat conflicted by being in that situation?
Not really. I think that it is important for people to understand that we're all allowed to make financial decisions based on our circumstances. I got that property, a few years ago, and it is providing housing to a Canadian family, and I'm happy to to be contributing to that housing supply.
I don't think anybody's suggesting you're doing anything illegal, but do the optics look weird?
I think that we've followed all the rules. I know myself and all my colleagues, we follow all the rules that are in place to report any assets that we own, and I personally have done the same in this particular regard.
Okay, let's finish up on this. In the years after the Second World War, which, believe it or not, I did not cover. I'm not quite that old. The government, actually, the federal government, hands-on built homes, right? 1.5 million homes between 1944 and 1960.
Yes.
And they rented them at 20% of a person's income to make sure that people could actually afford to get them. Right now, I don't have to tell you what it's like trying to get a place, particularly here in the capital city of Ontario. It's so beyond the means of most people. What would it take for your government to reconsider current policy and do something even more out there, like this policy of 75 years ago?
Look, I mean, I'm always open to new ideas. I mean, it's something to reflect on, but I can say that what our current approach is to really respect the expertise and the credibility and the enthusiasm and the dynamism at the local level of people who are already doing this. So what we see our role being is to support those who are doing the heavy lifting in building more affordable housing. So we fund those entities, whether it is provinces, whether it is municipal governments, whether it's nonprofits, whether it is private sector. We are confident that that approach is the most efficient in terms of turning federal investments into affordable housing. And through the National Housing Strategy programs, we have so far delivered almost 500,000 affordable units, either repaired or new builds. And that's 500,000 units of affordable housing that are in a better shape, either through repairs or that didn't exist before our government came up with the National Housing Strategy. If you look at, if you project into the next number of years, you'll see that those investments are continuing. We're not slowing down at all. In fact, we're increasing our investments through programs like the National Housing Co-Investment Fund, which will deliver tens of thousands of deeply affordable units, the Rapid Housing Initiative. We now have more money. For the first time in 30 years, we have new money to build new co-ops. The co-op model is a great model. $1.5 billion that will go into co-ops. The $4 billion Housing Accelerator Fund, which I believe will incentivize 100,000 units. Many of them will be affordable. Programs like the Rental Construction Financing Initiative, 71,000 new generation units that are rental, that are energy efficient and accessible, and will meet the challenge of access to rental units, affordable rental units in our largest cities, right? Those are the kinds of programs that are in the National Housing Strategy. Greening homes, the Greening Homes program is making a big difference in the pocketbooks of Canadians. And then finally, while we're building all these affordable homes, we're delivering direct rental subsidies to Canadians through the Canada Housing Benefit.
Minister Hussen, we always appreciate when federal cabinet ministers spend some time with us here at TVO, so we're grateful you accepted our invitation, and it's nice to have you here. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.